I guess it's yours, right?
No, she's traveling,
That's what I thought, okay,
and I think she's not.
yes.
Extending what we've got over to you right now, Austin's.
Okay,
Do you guys have anything today?
we don't know.
Pretty good color.
Okay, we've got Shane and Judy on the Zoom, I don't know. if anyone else-
That's my whole team then.
Okay,
Let me get these over to you real quick.
The 5-951. That's the debrief, or that might be the main.
See,
Like, general. I can show you, it's, for some reason, it's not in my.
Shane, Robert, Judy.
It's in, I mean, do you have the email? The E ones.
Colorful land. And at one point. I thought that's where that was.
No.
can you copy into that?
You made it till 2?
Yeah, I try not to have any before at least noon, and then I've been running around since noon, so I don't
You're right.
have any. But I don't drink coffee or anything, so it's a little bit easier, you know, it's really hard to wake up and be like, oh, I really would like one carbonated soda at 6 AM, you know?
Let me in, don't let me in, don't let me in, don't.
Especially when it's cold out.
Mhm.
Eva, Cassie, Anna, Austin, Shane, Robert, Judy, Tom. Okay, there we go. All right, we've got a couple for you and I just sent them over, but while they're coming over,
Yeah.
I think maybe this is on me. Do we know where we are with 9? Is that on our side or your side? Because we had some discussion about the reference to the regulation.
We literally both brought one, I believe.
I know. That's why I'm asking, I'm like, wait a second, like, are you waiting for us? Or are we waiting for you? Are we close enough to where we can just try to maybe craft something together? Like,
I mean, we're still completely fine with it if you just remove the word ethical. So
no,
like,
we heard that, but
Yeah.
we didn't know how you guys felt about a reference to the regulations and statutes which already apply.
Um,
I mean, so I wasn't here in person when
Oh,
we did
okay,
it, right?
that's
We were on Zoom, but, well, what I was gonna say is based on the context of that section, I'm not sure how well the reference to the policies are. Because if you read the like greater line, other than just the ethical standards part,
Mhm.
it's like in reference to like the university upholding our rights in academic freedom.
Yeah,
And so like when I looked back over the language that you sent, to me, it didn't make as much sense. But we haven't had a detailed discussion
okay,
about
all
it.
right, well,
So,
maybe, I mean, even if you want to put it in up on the university responsibility section, or if you want to put it in another area, I think we'd be okay with that, because I think, like I said, in just the general terms, I think we heard, you guys made some good points about sort of the ambiguity and vagueness or opaqueness of what an ethical standard might be. So like I said, we felt that it might be more palatable to have a reference to things which I don't think we dispute apply. You know, the regulation and the statute, I don't think we're going to dispute whether or not those apply. So,
correct, but
Yeah.
I don't know how much they fit within the context of the meaning of that, like whatever it is,
Okay.
like B section.
all right. Well, if you would have a discussion and just let us know, that would be great.
Okay,
Um,
and I just got your email here. so-
okay, why don't we go ahead and start with 7? So, we got some copies for you here. Here's the deal. So I went through and tried to manually remove, there was somewhere between 115 and 120 content controls. And they make it very, very difficult to edit. So I went through and tried to delete as many as I could, and then I just tried to clean it up. What you're gonna see highlighted is just what deviates in general from current contract language. I couldn't go back. There were so many different colors and so many different notes and so many different people that were identified. So feel free to go ahead and check this against, I don't know how many different versions of this we've had back and forth. So I just tried to, clean it up and present kind of where we are. So I recognize and realize that we have gone back and forth in line 4 multiple times about average or not. You've made it very clear you want it out of the language. I just want to make it clear that our position continues to be that taking a visa requirement or an international student requirement and applying it across the entirety of the bargaining unit and taking it out is just not something that we are interested in doing. And part of the reason is why, and I know we disagree on whether or not the CBA should be used to enforce visa requirements or not. I mean, I just don't think that we're going to come to terms on the fact that we just disagree that that's what the contract is for, or that is an appropriate use of the contract. So
What do you mean by that?
So what you're doing is you're taking an external requirement that applies to some of the members of the bargaining unit. And our interpretation of what you've presented is, well, in order to ensure that the university is abiding by the requirements for students that are on a visa, we want to take that language, we want to put it in the contract, and we want to apply it to every member of the bargaining unit. That's our interpretation of what you all presented.
Okay, so you view it as an expansion of something that's already required.
No, what we've tried to do is down in lines 8 through 11 is capture that concern and acknowledge, for any employee who's legally prevented from working more than the average hours in a given week, the employee and supervisor shall work together to ensure the employee's work schedule complies with any such requirements. In other words, we will acknowledge that that is a limitation for some members of the bargaining unit. But again, there's no compulsion whatsoever to take that requirement and apply it to everyone in the bargaining unit. Furthermore, if that was a concern, we continue to believe that using the CBA language to try to enforce that requirement or that limitation isn't really, the individuals that are under that requirement and that restriction are under that requirement and restriction irrespective of what it says in the CBA. Just because it's in the CBA doesn't mean all of a sudden the restriction exists. And again, I recognize that we have a difference of opinion on this. I'm not saying that, I'm 100% right and you're wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we just have a fundamental difference of opinion on how this works. So, I think that continues to be, our position on that.
What does the words "the average" mean in that sentence in 9? What does that add to this statement then? I'm trying to understand this sentence fully and completely here without understanding, right? So more than the average hours in a given week, is it just?
Well, it's a reference back to the statement in line 4. So because they can't work, whatever the stated average is the finite discrete mathematical limit in any given week, irrespective of previous amounts worked.
Right. Okay, so I do not want to get to hypotheticals.
No, that's fine.
That's the closest I think I have here is, I'm still thinking from this perspective of, international GA is only allowed to work 20 hours a week, right? And for this contract, we have the stipulation, they will work together with their supervisor to ensure that the employee's work schedule complies with any such requirements, right? So what is the protection for those GAs then at that point? If they talk to the supervisor and say, hey, I'm only allowed to work 20 hours a week, and you give me work for 25, and the supervisor says, no, like this is what you need to do this week, even if it takes extra time, what's their protection here to say that they can say, hey, this is overwork. This is something that I should not be forced to do.
Yes, I think it's a good question. Our interpretation of that is a requirement, and that is overseen and implemented and complied with through the experts of the visa requirements that exist in the International Center. That is not a matter for contract compliance. Again, you wanted a reference to it. I think that's what we're willing to acknowledge here is that there may be a need for someone in that situation to work with their supervisor. I think that's allowed inherently without us saying it, but we're acknowledging it. Go ahead.
I just want to ask, because we've brought this up before, right? If they go to the International Center and they say, I'm working more than my 20 hours.
Right.
Doesn't that get them in trouble? And like, what incentive would they have to go to that person?
Well, they're working more than they're supposed to work. I don't know. That is not, it's not like up for interpretation. But again, because it's not up for interpretation, I don't know why it needs to be in the CBA. It is an external requirement. And if the requirement changes, it's still going to be a requirement. Like irrespective of what the contract says about those type of things, they exist whether or not we want them to.
Yeah, then we can move on.
Okay. So what we've tried to do in 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4 is capture the language that I know we've worked a lot. There's been a lot of work back and forth on these. I think we really have this first of all, in color. I just wanted to show the amount of language to which we are willing to deviate from current contract language. Everything that's highlighted is new language.
Yeah.
I realize it doesn't comply with what you all are interested in, but to say that we're not willing to consider augmenting or increasing the information in this article is just, it would be factually untrue. So, and I realize that it doesn't have the specific explicit protections in here that you all have presented, and none of this language should be individually new, but I do think it was so chopped up that it was a little difficult to read. So what you'll not see in 7.2 or 7.2A is going to be an explicit definition, which I know has been an interest of GAU the entire time. You know, we had said initially to sort of talk about it from a concept perspective. We thought that maybe there was a way forward on having a definition for just the research assistants. You all had wanted to include both research and teaching assistants. Understanding that there didn't seem to be an interest in considering them differently, we just withdrew the explicit definition. We heard what you said about not wanting to have them, you know, sort of considered differently. So like I said, I don't think any of the language necessarily in lines 13 through 19 is different than what you've seen before. In terms of, you know, acknowledging that there's a distinction between employment and academic work. In line 20A or line 20, section A, you know, for employees assigned to research, employees may request to meet with their supervisor to ensure that work expectations, including estimated time to complete assigned tasks, are clear and understandable. Additionally, employees may request to meet with their supervisor to review time actually spent performing tasks and request modifications if actual time is greater than the time limits described in 7.1 above. Again, I don't think any of those individual sentences or components are different. I think we had then attempted to summarize them and put them all together in a way that was easily readable, at least in this version. And then the review of workload expectations and the review of overlap with academic work are provisions that I think we had, for the most part, kind of somewhat agreed to, but, you know, obviously, we haven't TA'd it yet. So I did think that, at least conceptually, departments reviewing the assigned workloads once per academic year, and then departments having the ability to define clear distinctions. Again, I don't think anything in those I don't think you all would find particularly offensive, but I also realize it falls short of the explicit protections that you all want, so.
Yeah, I think the biggest oversight is just the elimination of the explicit definition of excessive workload. I think that's something we've made clear time and time again. That's something that we think is necessary for this. I do appreciate the work you guys have obviously put into this. And I think we are getting closer to that, but I think at the very least, that is something that I think is important to have. I think we've talked about the language back and forth a lot. I know looking at our last version we gave to you guys, we had kind of torn it up a lot, but I think that's something that we think is vital to make this workload article work in its entirety.
Yeah, well, I mean, to that point, Austin, I mean, I do think, you know, if we just wanted to go back to the current language as written, we'd be willing to do that too. I mean, we spent a lot of time on this article, and I just think there's components of it that I'm not so sure we're going to be able to come to agreement on. So, I mean, the current contract language, in lieu of being able to agree on any pieces of it, you know, that's probably also an option we can consider.
I'm sorry, wait, so our options are, you gave us an article, which, I mean, I appreciate the work you guys have put into this again. And I don't think I stated anything that was, I apologize if it came out as rude or anything like that. I stated
No, I didn't think it
there was a gap between where we think we are, and it's something we think is vital, and or I was met with we can return to current contract language. That seems like a severe escalation. And I'm trying to, I mean.
No, I'm saying it's an option. What I'm saying is if, you know, because we've talked about a lot of these provisions, and I think we've made good progress. What I'm saying is, we're not necessarily closing that door. If you find that there's an advantage to returning to that, like if these provisions on all the individual provisions, if you find that they are not meeting what you guys want, I don't want to take off the table the fact that if you said, you know what, this is not working for us at all, if you wanted to consider going back to that as an alternative way, we would be open to that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying take it or leave it, take this or go back to that's no. I'm saying, if that is something that you want to explore, just returning to that, because the way we've constructed it is just not, we've gone away that is too far away from what you all had expected and you don't like it. you know, I just want to say that's another option we could explore is kind of starting over.
I wanna just ask, like, why do you want excess workload to only focus on RAs? And like, why would you not consider having it cover all graduate assistants?
Sure. So I think it's a good question. I think we had some conversation about this a couple months ago, and I think a lot of it is determined by the nature of teaching work. To some extent, you know, some of it is driven by the employee, and let me it kind of dovetails with the conversation about averages a lot. And this is one of the reasons too that we have some concerns about that. So let's say that I'm a teaching assistant rather than a research assistant. Say I'm a teaching assistant. And let's say for whatever reason, I don't grade anything for 2 weeks in a row. Okay. I'm busy with other stuff. I'm not able to get to it, blah, 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 blah. So I do my teaching time and my office hours, but I don't necessarily meet the expected 20 hours because I'm busy doing other stuff. In that third week, in order for me to catch up, which oftentimes is common in education, whether it be research, teaching, or otherwise, I have a mountain of things to grade and respond to, and it takes me 60 hours in week 3, let's just say, which would average out to 20 a week. But because and there wasn't necessarily a practical way for a supervisor to know on a weekly basis that you didn't do all of the grading that you should have necessarily done. There's not really a practical mechanism for a direct supervisor to say, you know, did Patrick do his 20 hours of grading this week? I mean, they probably could if they went into each individual section and looked at how many threaded discussions had been reviewed and how many emails have been sent. I mean, but not in a way that's practical. At that point, it would become our issue that an employee had made the decision to not necessarily engage in that work. And then they have sort of this mountain to climb in week 3. And I know you had said we really don't do hypotheticals, but I mean, I don't know how else to sort of to answer your question. I mean, I think that's one of the concerns. That's one version of the concerns we would have.
It's under 7.2 distinction from academic work. So you're asking from the perspective of somebody who's signed up for supervised teaching and
I'm just talking about like, I mean, because the definition that you guys brought was being explicitly asked to work more than the hours that you are assigned,
right.
right? And I might be paraphrasing slightly, but that is basically the words that you use.
Yes.
And so how is being explicitly asked to work more than the number of hours you assigned only, and I understand your hypothetical, but like, my question was, how is that only applicable to RAs and not to TAs? And like, why would it only be like grievable, right? Because that's ultimately what you're getting at. It would only be grievable for RAs.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong.
No, go ahead.
7.1, 7.3, and 7.4. Or 7.1 and 7.3 would apply to TAs to any GA, right? It's just the ones that overlap with academic work.
I think Hannah's asking about the previous provision that was in line 20 that we withdrew.
Oh,
I
okay.
think is that what you're
Yes,
asking?
that's
Okay,
what I'm talking
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's a component of that. You know, we also talked about several months ago, I think, the fact that, you know, people have different speeds with which they perform tasks.
Okay.
So one of the things that we went back and forth on a lot, and it's one of the reasons that the provision came out is, well, do we really want to get in an argument about, look, let's just say from a teaching perspective, and this applies to RAs as well. So that's one of the reasons that we withdrew it was, okay, you're expected to grade 50 papers a week.
Mhm.
Okay, let's just say. And to meet the exemplar standard of feedback and annotation,
Mhm.
you know, one TA is able to do that in 3 hours, and it
Mhm.
takes another TA 8 hours. And I think we can probably reasonably agree that there's going to be a continuum of speed and, you know, efficiency for engaging in that type of behavior.
Mhm.
And some of it's just personal expertise. Some of it is how much time do you have spent time doing it, you know, all these types of things. It really kind of puts it back on the employer then to throttle not the work that needs to be accomplished, but it would have to be completely contextualized, but what that employee would self-report they're able to do in a given time frame. And we don't know how to untangle that. I mean, let's say employee one, and I'll give you sort of a very, maybe an unfair example, but I think it's one that you can kind of understand. Let's say employee 1 is focused on getting the work done and is sitting in a quiet environment and is very, very focused. Employee 2 is doing it sitting at the union with Netflix on in the background and, you know, also playing on their phone. I mean, if we're just punching the clock, I mean, now some people work great in that environment, but other people don't. So much of it is self-determined at that point. So I think those are some of the types of, those are some of the things that we talk.
So can I ask you a question that like,
Sure,
is just right now.
yeah, absolutely.
Is like, would you consider leaving in a definition of excess workload that just has RAs? Or are you fully retracting that?
I don't know. I think some of the same conversations we had in the light of, like I said, I think you guys made some good points about, look, why are you, we're one bargain, I can't remember the exact phrase you all used, but you're like, look, we're one bargaining unit, we're not multiple bargaining units. And I appreciated that you all didn't appreciate that we had
Mhm.
had effectively divided it. And that was feedback that we tried to take into consideration when we came back with this offer. I mean, so again, we felt like that was something that you all really didn't care for, so we took it out because we couldn't grapple with a definition that we felt would accomplish what we felt we needed to do, at the same time providing you all with the protections that you seek. So I'm not gonna say we wouldn't consider it, but that's how we arrived at the offer that we put out.
I think
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
move on, but I think we're closer on this. I think we're gonna take another
Sure.
look at this and see.
Great.
If we can't find a nice way to bridge our remaining divides, but.
Great. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm about as hopeful on Article 8 as I have been on Article 8 since we started this one. Article 8 was, I think, the very first article we started bargaining way
Yeah.
back in September. So here's what we have today, and I'm really hoping that this is gonna get us where we need to go. So here you go. So here's what we have. Okay, what we have done, we heard the feedback from last time. I actually left it highlighted. So here is what we have done. We have split out the definition of family in the bereavement provision to much more broadly apply. So in other words, if you go, everything else is the same as our last offer. Sibling is still crossed out of line 9 with respect to definition of immediate family in the context of the 12 weeks of paid leave.
Mhm.
However, we've made 2 adjustments in line 72 through 83. The first one is that all GAs who qualified for the bereavement leave would have access to the 4 days plus the 6, irrespective of where the unfortunate event occurred.
Mhm.
But in addition, we added a much broader definition for bereavement leave that includes spouse, domestic partner, great grandparent, grandparent, parent, brother, sister, child, grandchild, or the great grandparent, grandparent, parent, brother, sister, or child of the employee's spouse, or domestic partner, or an individual who is the person's current legal guardian. So agreeing to the constrained definition for the paid leave of 12 weeks would not hardwire the same definition for accessing the bereavement leave, which I think we understand and we respect the fact that it's different if you want paid leave to actually care for someone as opposed to having time accessible to you to go attend services in the immediate aftermath of the death of a family member.
And if that were the case, you could still access 12 weeks of paid leave for yourself if you needed additional time.
It's still, we didn't change that. That's still in here. Bereavement
Because that's
leave.
still the
Yes.
personal level.
If you wanted to take it to the absolute extent, and I think that's kind of contemplated in here, you could take the 4 days of paid leave. If you had your 5 days of leave, you could use that, and then you could get up to 12 weeks if you qualified for paid leave for your own or someone else's. For example, one of the examples we talked about, I don't think we talked about it at the table, but we certainly talked about on our side was, okay, let's say that it is, let's say it's a younger sibling, right? Let's say you have a younger sibling who's currently living at home. If you're the older sibling and you have a younger sibling living at home with a parent, unfortunately, that parent were to pass away and you became the guardian of the sibling in that process, you would get the 4 days for the bereavement leave. You could then access the 5 days of personal leave if you wanted to, but you wouldn't even need to access those 5 because then in the process of becoming the legal guardian, you could also access the 12 weeks of paid leave. So you would get 12 weeks plus 6 days, and then you'd have 5 days on the back end to use if you really wanted to. If you still had the 5 days of it. Assuming that you made application appropriately and did all the stuff.
I guess we're gonna have to take some time to look at this and talk to GAs about their opinions on this. I guess the question that still remains is why. I mean, obviously removing sibling from the immediate definition of immediate family, specifically as it applies to paid leave, is important enough to offer these other protections for bereavement and extending paid leave by 50%. But I mean, why is it that important to UF to remove the word sibling from that definition of immediate family as it pertains to paid leave?
Sure, because it's not, while you all don't have access to FML, we have modeled our policy on FML. In other words, it's not something that you guys federally qualify for due to a number of factors, the least of which is hours worked, but the bottom line is that we are happy to extend expansion of it from 8 to 12. For example, and I think I shared last time, in the case of maternity, paternity leave, in the case of your own personal health and illness, your own personal illness or caring for one of the people on the list. But if you have a sibling who is not currently you're not the legal guardian of that sibling, someone else is the legal guardian of that sibling. We don't believe we want to be responsible for providing you with 12 weeks of paid leave to care for a sibling that is not your legal responsibility. If they are your response, you get it. If you're their guardian, there's no question, you get it. This isn't the case if you have a sibling that's someone else's legal responsibility. We don't believe we should be responsible for giving you 12 weeks of paid leave to care for a sibling who is someone else's legal responsibility.
But it was okay up until now,
Right,
right? Because it was in the
yes,
CCL.
right. We also weren't expanding it to 12 weeks.
Right, but we didn't ask to either.
No, that's true. It just, again, from our perspective, if we're considering expanding the leave, we're gonna tell you all, and again, the data showed that of the 59 people that took it, 0 of them took it for siblings. I don't know, I mean, it's up for you all, if you wanna look at the brand new parents and tell them, look, the university was prepared to give everybody 12 weeks in the case of you having a child. But we think in case that hypothetically somebody wants to use this to take care of a sibling that they're not legally responsible for, we want to stay at 8 weeks. I mean, again, you certainly are not compelled to agree to this. We are trying to give you the best offer we possibly can to provide you with the benefit that we are prepared to provide other groups. Because here's what I think is likely to happen down the road. 3, 4, 5 years go by, it's not us necessarily sitting here. Here's the question that's going to be asked. Why do you only give us 8 weeks of paid leave and you give everybody else 12? I mean, if I were I would certainly ask that question. Wait a second, why do we get the short end of the stick? Everybody else gets 12 paid weeks of leave and we don't? At a time when we're, by composition of bargaining team member, by just pure, demographics, average age, we're, going to be younger parents or early in our careers and we get, a whole month less of leave time than people who are likely more established in their careers. I mean, it just seems, I don't want to have to answer that question. I mean, I would have asked, but I don't want to have to answer it.
I don't appreciate the framing of trying to put the guilt on us for having to tell people that they can't take an extended paid leave for doing that. And maybe that's not the way you intended to frame it, but that's how it came across over here is.
Okay.
That having to tell, new parents that they don't get as long as their paid leave, that's not a guilt we would have, because if it was something that we,
Just
it
give us
was
everything we
important, I
want.
think that the University of Florida could have given us 12 weeks without asking for anything on the other.
Yeah,
end.
you
I
just give
think-
us everything we want every time. And
I know,
otherwise
I'm
it's your-
saying don't put the guilt on us when you're asking for something in return for these things. That's not how we're gonna frame these things. We asked GAs before and they said they were interested in keeping the word sibling. We will definitely go back and continue asking them. But, I mean, we're not gonna accept that framing, that we should accept guilt for accepting less.
No,
than
it's
GAs deserve.
fine. I think one of the things that we continue to run into in these sessions, I'm gonna say this comprehensively, is there seems to be zero appetite repeatedly for acknowledging any concessions made at the table. Everything is turned into a accusatory assumption that we are in some way, shape, or form Greeks bearing gifts. And I just, it's hard to make a concession and demonstrate a concession because it just seems that there's no appetite to listen to it. And I don't mean that just about this one. I don't know how to appropriately posture when we are attempting to move towards y'all's position. It's very, I mean, I don't know what to do to show in a way that is received without, I don't know, I'm,
This is,
we felt like this was a concession. We felt like we were moving towards your position, and it just seems like it's, unless we get all the way there, it's not even worthy of consideration. So I guess that's fine.
look, I think we're close on Article 8, but this is not a concession, and maybe that's just the way we're framing it here, but we were very close to TAing this, and the University of Florida said, hey, we actually want to remove sibling and add 12 weeks. We went back and asked our GAs, and we said, what would you prefer we do? And they said, we'd rather keep 8 weeks. And we returned and said, this is, similar to the offer we had before. We haven't changed anything. Our GAs don't want to make that trade. And you've come and said, yes, we've moved, and maybe it's a concession from where you were before, but this is instigated by you guys asking for this additional thing on the back end of this, right? And the bereavement, I understand
It's
it's
a
all new.
brand new, it's a whole new program.
That is new, and that is something that we had worked on and gotten language in before we were having this discussion on siblings. When having the discussion on siblings, this is a new thing that we were discussing at the tail end of this article in bargaining. And that's how we view it. We appreciate, the work we put into this. Obviously, this is not an article that has come easy. And we're gonna ask GAs and see what they want us to do on this. But that's how that's how our framing will remain. Those are the only two articles that,
Yeah, we don't
said
have
to
anything
me,
else.
the question has to be asked about Article 10. It's on your side of the table.
We've responded to your proposals on Article 10. It's not on our side of the table. We've responded and we've responded and responded and responded. Article 10 is not on our side of the table.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll say it again on the record. No, your proposal is rejected. It's no longer on our side of the table.
Okay.
No is a perfectly valid legal response to a proposal by either party. We've said no again.
Okay, so what's your end goal for Article 10? Because we have given you proposal after proposal, making changes and making concessions. And we've gotten nowhere. We have given you bite after bite, and we have gotten nothing. And not even nothing in terms of actual effort spent on Article 10 to try to come to a reasonable TA, actually nothing. The word no does not help us get to a TA on Article 10. The word no does absolutely nothing except put us in the same boat we were 3 months ago. So what is your end goal, that we bow down to you and accept your gracious offer that you gave us 6 months
If you
ago?
want to talk about things that we're not going to accept in terms of framing, I'll go ahead and attach it to that comment. Then come on.
What do you want us to do for Article 10? What is your end goal for Article 10 here? We've given you proposal after proposal, and your side of the table seems unwilling to even change anything or discuss anything to a degree where we can come to a TA that both sides are happy with. Obviously, we are unhappy with the offer you guys gave us several months ago. You have repeated it and repeated it. We have gone to the table time and time again to make changes to it in the effort of finding something that we can talk about and make these discussions.
Mhm.
Even if it doesn't end up with us having, significant deviations from where we need something to have a discussion about.
I mean,
And saying no doesn't do anything. It doesn't allow us to get to a TA. And we would love to finish bargaining. We would love to, sign this contract and get it done with. We were not going to do it by refusing to have a conversation about Article 10, because if we continue down this route, we are never gonna TA Article 10.
And if I could, you're expressing frustration, so if we're gonna have an honest conversation about feelings, like, some of our framing is coming from the fact that, like, we are hitting a wall with you on 10,
Mhm.
and we are increasingly frustrated.
Sure.
So if we're just gonna, like, put it out on the table, like, yes, you're making movement here. Sure, you're adding stuff, that's cool. We appreciate that you're putting in effort on this, right? And that's what we wanna see on 10. We wanna see any effort.
So I don't know how else to explain this other than months ago, you got our last best final on Article 10. We are not compelled by anything to continue to bargain an article just because you want to continue to demand that we give you new proposals. We're not. We don't have to keep bringing a counter to your proposal if we said, we've made our last best final, govern yourself accordingly. And I feel like we've attempted to do that. I acknowledge 100% that you're frustrated with our offer. I acknowledge that it's not up to what you want. I acknowledge the fact that you're frustrated as much as we are, if not more so. I'm not taking any of that away, to your point. But we are not compelled to continue to bring a counter, because if that were the case, why not come to the table and ask for literally, in an edge case, $1 million and say, well, until you come to whatever it is, we're just gonna refuse to accept anything. Now that you would never do that. I'm just saying, mathematically, there is no upper limit other than what you all are stipulating is what you want to bargain. We're just not compelled to continue to bring counter proposals once we believe we have met our responsibility to give you good faith bargaining proposals for a reasonable amount of time, which we feel we did. I am not saying you all accept our proposal. I'm saying we don't have to continue to bring counters despite your insistence that we do. Look, I realize we're not going to get together on this. I realize that we're not going to agree, but I do not believe that we interpret what our legal responsibility is on that the same way. And you had said that you're going to consult with your attorneys. You've said that a couple of times, and I said, by all means, please do. You know, I continue to say, look, if you think that we've done something inappropriately, by all means, avail yourself of whatever, advice that you feel like you need to get. I mean, I don't take that personally, but I don't know if just continuing to say, well, we have our proposal and you have our proposal and you're not moving towards us. You're right. We haven't moved any closer to you. I'm not saying we have on Article 10. We haven't.
That's square legally for you guys on the fact that, I mean, I guess we've asked this question, and you implemented raises through 10.5, and that's all you told us. But like, you brought the same article to us, the same offer, right? Or when you reject us, that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're
Yes.
reifying your last
We're
offer.
reasserting the previous offer. You're 100% right.
And then you legally, by the contract, implement raises.
Mhm.
And then you continue to not bring a proposal, even though within that email that was sent out to everyone, you
Mhm.
recognize and you say in there that you're going to, I don't remember the words, it doesn't exactly say continue bargaining, but you respect the bargaining process
Mhm.
or whatever it says. So like, how is this respecting the bargaining process? Because
That's a good question.
what it feels to us is that you gave us a last best final offer.
Mhm.
And then you implemented that offer after telling us that you wouldn't do it. Remember in September, I asked, can we do a pullout? Can we do a single ratification? We had this whole conversation. You told us no raises would go into effect until we had a fully ratified contract.
So
And then you did it anyway.
I said I wasn't interested in signing an MOU reopener on raises. That's what I said.
Or a pullout ratification, which we offered to do.
Right. I said we weren't interested in splitting the contract. No, we weren't interested in splitting the contract.
I mean, we can go back to the recording. I remember so vividly you saying the BOT would not implement raises until we had a fully ratified contract.
Okay,
And that's not what happened.
okay. So I also think at the time we didn't foresee bargaining for 17 months.
That was only 5 months ago.
Okay.
And there's been no new contract since then, except from us.
Yeah,
So the other thing the other part of your question I want to address is we still have articles that we are actually actively working on and we are going back and forth on. We don't only implement a single article. So, we are still committed to trying to, wherever we can get agreement on the other articles, we are interested in continuing to do that. Even if we are at loggerheads on a particular article, it doesn't mean we just stop working on the rest of it, because we still have a number of articles that have to be bargained. I mean, I appreciate if you're like, look, we don't want to talk about anything else.
That's not what we're saying.
No,
because we continue to come here and we're talking to you.
Yes,
And I'm just gonna openly say, like, we want any movement on 10.
you've made that abundantly clear.
Okay,
We don't have any other proposals today.
no, we don't.
I think we can get some good counters on this. You wanna stop the recording?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.